You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
All right, we're going to start tonight, Board of Finance special meeting, June 15th, 2021. And first on the agenda is to hear an update on the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter Revenue Project Appropriation Request. We ordinarily have a brief period of citizens' comments, which is not on this agenda, but in the spirit of some of the participants tonight, I will allow Mr. Cook to speak for 10 minutes. Wayne, you're up now, if you so choose.
You don't have a hand mic, do you?
I don't.
Because I don't know, I'm a little loopy right now.
Do you want to not stand?
Well, I'd rather not stand if you could all hear me.
Can he? You could sit and we could probably hear you. Can you get him a mic?
This one can reach over there.
I had a chemo this morning.
Yeah, it's.
You got one? So Wayne, I'm gonna give you 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Okay, can I have 1 minute to address the board on a parliamentary issue? Just 1 minute? 1 minute?
It's not appropriate, but I will give you the 1 minute.
Okay, here's what I'd like to say first of all. I understand that you usually give citizens 10 minutes or so before the meeting. And that, you never used to use, to do that, so I appreciate it. Excuse me, the problem is that I may say the most brilliant things in the world right now. And a guy like Jeff Lestad during your discussion says, you know, I think Cook's full of potatoes. And he starts making his points. And I have no opportunity to rebut him, because my opportunity is gone. So I think there's something fundamentally flawed about that format. I think that you should allow citizens to continue speaking as long as it's appropriate during the agenda item. I just want to say that. As far as the item goes, I passed out booklets. I emailed quite a bit of the information. But I want to say right off the bat that, and I think Laura and Marilyn will speak to this, I don't think there was a citizen that was more supportive of the shelter as it stands now than I was publicly. There was, maybe it was a few. And I still am. I have no problem with the shelter. I think it's a beautiful facility. But when I started looking at things, particularly things that I have a problem with inherently that go on in this town, I said, you know, it's once again the process. Once again the process which is flawed here. And in this case, it's terribly flawed. So I'd like to go over quickly. You all got a booklet. There's about, I don't know, 15, 20 questions, which you think are all relevant. They all relate in the next 100 pages or so to the minutes of the animal shelter in the last 5 years. And you can see things that I thought and still think were done incorrectly. Now, you can start off with the first one. How did an initial small change to the shelter, which was talked about in the early, I think it was 2016, 2017, become a whole new shelter? Well, it did, but I don't know if it speaks to the need of a shelter. If it started out with, we just need HVAC and we need a little bit more room here and a little bit of room here, and now we go from 3,000 feet to 5,000 feet. So that's a question that speaks to the need, but listen, the way I look at it is build for the future, and there's nothing wrong with that inherently. The big problem, I think we're all here, is the 1.7 million overcharge due to apparently the COVID. And my simple question is this. I've been reading about the COVID and the escalation that it causes in the price of goods and construction, and it seems that it's supposed to stabilize sometime in mid to late 2022. And I guess the question I have for everybody is, are you willing to give $1.7 million up now and not wait at the most probably a year and a half? And if that happens the way that it's supposed to happen, You just blew 1.7 million because the prices could very easily stabilize. And I get it that nobody has a crystal ball, but I wouldn't bet against it. I don't think the prices are going up anymore. But the point is, that's a big bet. That's a very big bet. If you authorize this tonight, it's a very big bet you're taking. And I think it's a disservice to the town. I've also asked on the FOIA, and Trista will speak to this, I have about 7 FOIA items, and where are the before and after budgets? I wanted to see, and other citizens did too, what happened from 2.5 or 2.8 to 4.5, and where was the itemization on each of those? And I didn't see it. I saw a whole bunch of bid responses, but I never saw that simple 2 documents that I think would have answered a lot of questions. The fundraising process, look at it. I mean, I know Jennifer Anaskovich is very competent, I know she's very talented, but when you look at the process and by which she got this job, it's wrong. It's just plain wrong. I mean, the commission waives bids that they had no authority to waive. The first selectman said, yeah, go ahead and do it, fine with me. And they give her a job for a year. And then I guess they figured, well, we better put this out to bid because this doesn't look right. So they put it out to bid, and lo and behold, she got it. Read it. Read what I put in there. I even pointed out the pages. The fundraising process was at best flawed. And maybe my biggest problem here is, and I'm sitting, how much time do I have, Lisa?
About 5 minutes.
All right. Is this backroom solar plan by the Green Cult. And I call them the Green Cult right to them because that's exactly the way they act. It's not an insult. I think it's a very accurate portrayal. So I asked the Animal Commission themselves, I asked the Building Commission, can you keep the citizens appraised of what you're doing energetically? Because I know these people, and they're going to try to get everything they can into this building, solar or wind or whatever they believe in. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. And you know what? They did it all behind closed doors. I got the emails from Greg Ames and what's her name? McCarthy Mercury and all the techniques. And the first selectman's going around, oh, this building's not solar. He said at the last selectman's meeting. So what do? I call the engineer on the email. They said, is this building solar? He goes, yeah, completely solar. The only difference is that the solar is not on the building. The solar is going to be outside the building on trailers or something else. Well, that's, come on. That's not being accurate. That's not being truthful. There's a complete lack of openness and accountability to this process. I will argue that until I'm in Center Cemetery. It's wrong. And I have pending FOIA requests that will shed more light on this. Am I here to be a pain? Partly, because I'm sick and tired of the process disappointing us over and over and over again. Why can't we ever do anything in this town, like a beautiful project like this, and do it right? Why can't it all be above board? Because it's not. And that's what bothers me the most. Community house, same way. The stuff that's going on in this town, nobody wants to listen to it, but it's true. Nobody's ever proved us and me and the other citizens wrong. So again, I want to reiterate, I can't really, I said this last night at the Building Commission meeting, and I'll finish up. I'm not an elected official. I don't have a lot of authority. I don't have any political power, nor do most citizens that, don't hold elected positions. But what we can do is expose these things for what they are. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm exposing this for what it is. It's wrong. The whole process is wrong. If you want my opinion, what I would do is I would stay with the plan, wait out a year and a half to see what happens with all these increased costs. Go back and fix the process, get the Green Cult where they belong, and that's talking to other citizens in this town about different opinions, and get this process reputable. Get it fair, get it something that we're proud of. I have nothing against this animal shelter. I got RTM members over here, I give them a booklet, they say, I don't need this. I said, you need it more than anybody. Because they don't look at anything. You think this is going to be a problem. Wait till we get to the RTM. That's the most part enormously frustrating. So that's all I want to say. I'm for the shelter. I think it's a beautiful facility. I think that Too bad it went over, but in a way, I'm not too sad it went over because it showed what else was going on here. And what else is going on, and you read the books. I ask everyone in this room, read the books I gave out. And if you think there's anything wrong with me, call me up. I mean, my number's in, and just say, Wayne, you're full of potato. You're all wrong. Yeah, don't hold your breath. Because the books are right. And the process is wrong. Thanks for letting me speak.
Okay, Wayne, thank you for your comments. I'm going to, sir?
Mr. Chairman, is Mr. Cook the only one who's going to be allowed to speak now in public?
I will, would you like to say something?
I would. I'd like 3 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
What I would just request that this does not become into a debate. If people want to make their points, that's fine. Please keep it civil. And if you could step up and introduce yourself to the...
Would you like to come to the front?
Yeah, if you could.
There's a mic here.
So my name is John Hartwell. And I want to say, first of all, that I've had rescue dogs for over 25 years, so I love rescue dogs, and I'm very much in favor of shelters. But as I read through the memo from Mr. Finch, actually made my head hurt. So first of all, Mr. Finch says that in light of inflationary pressures, a 15% increase in net costs is tolerable. And in this regard, he says he's not an expert on inflation, but that he trusts the construction manager to provide more details. Now, are we to understand that Mr. Finch has not asked for the details? Think about that for a second. This is due diligence to do your accounting. And we need to know how the project increased by 60%. This is not a small number. And if he has not asked for the details, why not? And if he has, where are they? Because Mr. Cook has asked for them. So why can't the rest of us see them? So is this part of what we do in this town? Is this the way we do business? By hiding the details? I hope not. How can you come to the table with a $1.7 million increase and not provide the details? And in terms of inflation, the inflation rate in the States for the last year has been 5%. So Mr. Finch talks about a 15% increase being tolerable. That's 3 times the inflation rate. And is this the way the town is going to be doing business going forward? I hope not, as a taxpayer. But the 15% in net costs that Mr. Finch talks about in his memo is actually net borrowing. It's not net cost, because he wants to pull another $650,000 from the fund balance. Now that's a cost. So, and in addition, he doesn't provide any details in the memo about what that impact is on the fund balance and the finances of the town, which I think all of you should be very concerned about. At least we should have this information. And together, those two things, the additional borrowing and the fund cost draw, brings us up to almost $1 million for the town. But then, beyond that, we have to go to our good friends in North Branford and ask them for an extra $214,500 to pay for this. And Mr. Finch tells us that this is an unappropriated expense. In other words, the people in North Branford have not agreed to this. And what I'd like to know is, has anyone asked them? Because if they don't go along with this and we decide to do this presentation, this proposal, we're going to be on the hook for that extra money, $215,000. But there's more. Because in addition, we have to go to the volunteers who have already committed to over $700,000. We're going to ask them for another $500,000 more, up to $1.2 million for the volunteers in this town. And we're going to, what was the word in the thing? We're going to ask them to come up with this money. But what if they can't? What if they fall short? Again, we're on the hook. So, into summary, Mr. Finch recommends that we take an additional $650,000 from the fund balance, that's free money, right? That we borrow an extra $306,000, for which we'll have to pay interest. That we will then rely on North Branford to come up with more than $200,000 that they're not expecting. And then we're going to ask the volunteers, we're going to encourage them, we're going to hold their feet to the fire for an extra $500,000. So net, I think this proposal should go down. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take two more people. This gentleman here.
How you doing? I just want to make a 2-second point. My name is Bob Eagle.
Can you speak up a little bit?
My name is, I'm just going to say one thing. My name is Bob Regal. I'm a builder in Branford. I just got finished with 3 projects. Building costs are at least 50% over what they normally are, so that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Mark, briefly.
Thank you, Joe. Mark Riccio, RTM member from the 6th District. The little bit that I know of this situation, and I'm just looking at the $1.7 million overrun. If this is brought to me today on the RTM, I would, just to let you know, I would be voting against moving forward with this. I think the project needs to be stopped. I think we need to have prices settle down. And I was also told by someone who's on this committee, who is a project manager of some type, that if we ripped out all of the energy saving equipment, the prices would be reduced greatly. That's what I heard. I don't have any facts, and I think the RTM should get the details of this project in order for us to make an accurate decision. And I think that's going to become political. I know you don't want to get political, but it will become political. I don't know why we wouldn't, at this point, be able to get the numbers so we can determine why the costs are so expensive or higher. So I just want to make my point. I don't know if anyone else, I was running late, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to proceed with item number 1, which is to hear an update on the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter Renovation Project appropriation request. Before I let you introduce yourselves and we carry on, we did look at this request back at the May 24th meeting, and that's when the initial resolution was put in front of us, which the Board of Finance decided not to act on because of some of the questions that were raised tonight, which was what's going on with the revenue side, what's going on with the expenditure side. Most importantly, what were the drivers that pushed the cost beyond the estimate, okay? That's why we're meeting tonight with a special meeting in order to understand not only the pathway that Jim has given us, and with some discussion with myself and the first selectman and others, as to a pathway for possible funding. Most importantly, it's what happened. Why are we here with $1.7 million? Okay, and that's why to the audience and those folks on cable that's why we're meeting tonight, is to find out those answers, to get down to understand what the original estimates were. Excuse me, whether or not the scope is the same, and why we're facing $1.7 million. So it's not that we are not concerned about it. We may or may not vote tonight, okay? Members are not sure whether or not we want to vote on this tonight. We do have another meeting on the 28th. It's a regular meeting. And so We do a lot of homework. It may not appear that the board does a lot of homework in public, but we do a lot of studying. We understand what's going on. We commiserate among ourselves. We talk to the administration, and we want a thorough understanding of it before we move forward, if we do. I just want to make that point. We're not just sitting here to put a stamp on $1.7 million. And for folks that know myself or other people on the board, we take our jobs very seriously. And we're not elected. And we try not to be political, even though there's 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Most of the time, you don't know that. So with that, gentlemen, please introduce yourself again, and let's get on with the conversation.
Good evening. My name is Brian Burrell. I'm the Director of Estimating for Enterprise Builders, the construction manager. Oh, sorry. My name is Brian Burrell. I'm the Director of Estimating for Enterprise Builders Incorporated, the construction manager for the project.
You're the construction manager?
I'm the Director of Estimating for Enterprise Builders. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Wayne Zarnecki, Operations with Enterprise Builders.
First name, sir.
Wayne Zarnecki.
And hello, everybody. I'm John Heffley, the town engineer.
Welcome, John. All right.
So we've prepared for you this evening is the packet that we handed out prior to the beginning of the meeting. Is a small package which has a cover letter which in detail describes kind of three main points which I'd like to speak to tonight. Those 3 main points in summary are the description of the process utilized from the date of our hire as construction manager to today, what we're currently seeing as material and labor escalation in the construction market, and then a brief comment on the sustainability measures and their impact on costs as we see them. So with regards to the pricing process, we were notified on February 16th of 2021 of our award as construction manager based on a response to a request for proposal, where we were asked to produce a general conditions estimate and a fee proposal. We immediately began a budget process based on 70% construction documents, which were dated February 19th, 2021, which we analyzed using our estimating process to establish our first budget, which was on March 10th, 2021. So our process briefly is to use a combination of our historical data from our 37 years in experience as construction manager, along with the assistance of subcontractors and vendors in the market to produce construction budgets. So the documents provided to us were stated as 70% CD. So there's enough tangible data on those documents for us to be able to engage with key vendors, not the street per se, but we do go to multiple vendors to get a sense of where the pricing is at that moment in time to represent back to the client what we perceive as the budget. So at that time,
I'm going to ask you a few questions as we move along.
Please do.
From my brief experience, ordinarily a 70% construction document is low in order to go out to bid with?
Well, we didn't go out to bid based on the 70%. We produced an initial, I'll call it a baseline budget for our first budget on March 10th. Yeah. So with ultimately off of that exercise, we projected the construction cost of about $3.5 million on March 10th, 2021. So from that process, we obviously identified its over budget from the original stated budget of construction, $2.2 million in the RFP. So we came to the table not only with the issue of cost compared to the established budget, but also some ideas on how to save money, which we termed value engineering. So we went through a methodical process with John, his team, and the design team it was about $600,000 of ideas that we put on the table. We were able to realize approximately $200,000 to $300,000 of ideas on how we could possibly save money. So at that point, the design team was authorized to proceed to 100% construction documents, which were then published for competitive bidding. And that was the process which began on the dates. Thank you. Yep. So the initial documents were published for bidding on April 22nd with the public advertising through the DAS website, as well as an advertisement on the town website. We also use a software called iSquareFoot to notify, I think it's 3,000 to 4,000 subcontractors in the state of the project for bid. Bids came back. Originally, they were scheduled to be opened on May 13th. That was extended via Addendum 1 on May 17th, and the bids were publicly opened on that date at 1:30 p.m. So within those bid documents, bidders were requested to hold their price for 90 days. So at that point, we took the apparent low bid values from the public opening process and entered them into what we term as a draft guaranteed maximum price. And our effort since that day has been to vet the apparent low subcontractors from that process to confirm that their bid is sound and there are no issues, exclusions, qualifications, et cetera. So that is a process we're in now. So the $3.8 million construction cost is a direct result of that publicly bid process. So the other exhibits which I prepared for you tonight kind of show some side-by-side comparisons. So if you turn to page 6, you'll see what we term variance report. And this report literally compares the two estimates. So the first estimate is the in the left column is that draft GMP. And the center column is an estimate titled Original Appropriation from the budget, which was established before we were brought on board as construction management. So we were provided some detail in terms of itemization, how that original 2895 number was arrived at. So what this report does is in a very methodical format, actually I apologize, page 5 is the beginning of this report, I misspoke. It shows you on an itemized format where we're seeing the costs come in on a collapsed basis today versus where they were projected in the appropriation budget, which was completed last year. So this report works in that a negative number in the column to the right is a savings and a positive number is an add. So you can kind of see down the line, for example, masonry, we are seeing $81,000 of cost based on the apparent low masonry bidder, but there were no costs anticipated in that original budget based on the information we provided. So this is an accountable way to kind of to show you what happened from comparing two estimates. We've basically taken the information provided to us and put it into our format. The following report, if I can point you to page...
Brian,
sure.
Last question
sure,
on page 5.
Yes.
The middle column of numbers,
yep.
Was that when you had 70%?
No, that was the budget prior to before we were brought on board. So I have a second report that shows the 4 iterations of estimate. I can walk you through the original appropriation estimate, again, not produced by us, but put into this format for comparison purposes. And then the 3 budgets which we've done. We did the original 70% baseline. Yeah. And then we did I'll call it an accepted value engineering estimate where we said, this is what we think is possible. And then we have today's draft GMP. That report begins on page 8.
I asked you to share questions of this, and that we let these gentlemen make their presentation back and forth, and then we'll go back and dig through their presentation.
So what you'll see on page 8 is, again, the same level of detail itemized by construction divisions, division 1 through 16, general conditions, site work, concrete, et cetera. And you can track the costs over time. So in each estimate, for example, if I were to take the site work, the original appropriation budget established at approximately $208,000. Our initial budget draft came in at $787,000, which through a value engineering effort, we projected a savings to $694, and then the bids came back in at $519. So on a line item basis, these are accountable costs across the board. The next page, page 9 of the package, shows the construction cost, kind of totaling at the line underneath OH&P. And then what we've done for the sake of analysis is taken the owner's soft costs, which again are not estimated by us at Enterprise, but we're showing them to you in this report so you can kind of see the cost trending where for the most part the soft costs held steady from the initial 3 budgets and then came in where they came in at the end. So this shows you accountably how the 2895 original appropriation budget compares to the 3 budgets that Enterprise Builders produced from between March 10th and then May 19th.
Excuse me, may I ask, will the public get a copy of that? I mean, you told me to interrupt, but...
All right, Wayne. This is a public document. It will be available.
Okay.
Okay. Not necessarily tonight, but we don't have copies. But it is.
Here's my point, and I don't mean to be a pain, but unless the public sees it and you guys go ahead and vote, how do you have an opportunity to comment on that document, which is what I've been asking for 3 weeks?
Please proceed, please.
I think it's a good question.
So what that kind of completes the general overview of the first point of the presentation. So,
Okay, why don't we start there, and if the board has questions, Harry, you've got some follow-up questions?
When did you let the animal shelter personnel or board know of the discrepancy? I saw it in here. There were some meeting times.
March 10th was the initial date of the issuance of the initial budget based on the 70% documents.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. This thing.
You okay for now?
For now.
Yeah, for you, Mr. Chairman. So just,
Excuse me, I can't hear you. Could you speak into the microphone, please?
I sure can.
Yeah, you know what, why don't we turn our mics on, gentlemen, that way.
Again, for you, Mr. Chairman, just on the site work, the initial budget was 208, and you came in at 787. And the 208 was from a February estimate?
No, that was from the I think the original appropriation. We were provided kind of a rough idea of the breakdown of the original.
And when did you get that again? I'm sorry.
That was in the last couple of days, actually. So we were aware of the total project, but we were never provided an itemized estimate of how that was arrived at, just the total number.
I mean, it's a pretty big mess.
But if I could, the original estimate that the original appropriation was granted through, that was kind of a conceptual budget through the architect at the time, kind of looking at the project based on what the needs were through the animal shelter. As we kind of moved through, started looking closer and closer through the 70%, kind of identified some areas where, they may have been missed. So originally, I think the parking lot was just paved. We identified that the driveway coming down to the parking lot is quite narrow. This would be the opportunity as part of this global project to widen that a little bit, repave it. Kind of similar, approach to some of the other buildings we've done is, kind of do the work and walk away. So we're not coming back and asking Public Works to, go back and repave that driveway 5 years from now.
So, John, the scope has changed.
On this particular item, yes, the scope was changed to include that driveway going up, as well as we did look at a few options to reconfigure that driveway. That was something that was not originally in the conceptual as well. Anyone that's been there, that configuration it's unsafe, frankly. So we've looked at a couple different options to realign that, to get that to work. So you're going to see some, there's an increase in that line item as well for that reason.
So that 311 increase, that 311,000 on site work is primarily due to the driveway?
There was some added scope. I'm not sure if you saw any creep based on, where we are in the market today. Let these gentlemen.
Yeah, there are the materials and pipe, plastic pipe, reinforced concrete pipe, structures that are pretty much across the board, which is the next part of our presentation. We're seeing, there's no trade that's kind of untouched at the moment with regards to material increases. So,
Bob, you good for now? Charlie?
Thank you. I'm looking at page 9, and I look at the original, which for the owner's contingency, which is about 190, and it jumped to 380. Is there a reason for that?
I would defer that to John. I think that was established by.
Yeah, Charlie, that's we're just holding a 10% contingency. So as the price of the work increased, the price of the owner's contingency increased for those unknowns. So.
Okay.
I have a question.
And I built a couple of big buildings, and this seems like a huge contingency. Just, my personal opinion.
Okay, thanks, Charlie, for now. Hector?
Yes, on page 5, there's the item thermal moisture protection. It looks like it wasn't there at the beginning, and now it's 500 and some odd thousand. Can you explain that, please?
So based on the breakdown provided to us, it looked like the thermal and moisture protection wasn't accounted for in the original estimate, but the special construction was. So you see, Mr. Casella, that there were costs that are not accounted for in our Division 13 special construction, but were accounted for in the original budget. So I can't comment on the nature of the conceptual budget how it was allocated, but just from and what was provided to us, it did appear that Division 7 wasn't accounted for.
Was this something in the foundation to prevent moisture from coming?
No, this is like, so Division 7 is roofing, siding, insulation, those types of, it's basically keeping the weather out, literally.
I see. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So that wasn't anticipated in the original estimate?
It wasn't in the document that was provided to us, but again, the Division 13 was. I don't know if that was a miscode or what have you. I can't speak to that, but just from I wanted to kind of show side by side of where we are versus where it was.
That's what we need.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jeff?
So that goes the same for the masonry and the steel too?
Correct.
Charlie? Go ahead.
You know, there's been some comments about the green energy savings. Are they in here? I mean, can you identify those?
Sure. So actually, that's the third part of what I prepared for tonight, but I could speak to it now. So there are definitely aspects of green construction which are in the design of this project. I'm actually a licensed architect myself, so I have some familiarity with some of the materials and specified. So there are cost premiums that are being realized in this project based on green construction, but I've put some rough numbers to them in my opinion. I think we're paying about an 8% premium in the HVAC for the design system, which is a very high efficient electric heat pump with what's called energy recovery. 8% on the apparent low bid is excuse me, I'll take a guess. Let me pull out the number. Bear with me. About $28,000 versus a conventional, maybe forced air gas-fired system. I think also in Division 7, the insulation package, there's quite a bit of spray foam insulation on the roof. That is expensive. We're also seeing a lot of escalation there too. I've put an approximate escalation of about 20% on a, again, conventional insulation package for the attic, which equates to approximately $16,000. So we see spray foam insulation and heat pump mechanical systems on a majority of the projects that we price. And we're typically pricing anywhere from 5 to 6 projects at a time. So there's definitely a push towards that type of system. I don't see it as anything that's unique to the market, certainly. The solar panels, we understand, those are not included in our price. We understand those, I believe, as a lease. John, is that correct? But so the solar panels, again, are not being accounted for in our numbers. But again, my understanding from those systems is there's minimal cost to the owner directly. So I can't really point to any one place where we have a very sophisticated, very unique system that's driving the cost with regards to energy efficiency beyond the mechanical and Division 7. So again, I do think there is a premium there, but I don't see it as the main reason why we're seeing the numbers where they are.
Brian, the only solar included in the package is for the hot water system.
Even now, so we've been asked to have our plumbing contractors install the system as provided to us by the owner. So even that material is not included within the numbers on the construction side here. It's obviously on the owner side. Correct, yeah. So the plumbing subs were asked to bid the installation only.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Bob.
So we don't have any idea what those outside costs are?
I don't know if I can speak to it, John.
So let me ask a question here. We're talking about your letter, and Wayne, you're going to address us?
No.
Okay, so you're the presenter?
I put this estimate together. I'm the director of estimate.
Okay, so we do have questions about the entire scope of the project, which includes the solar piece of it that may or may not be funded through an appropriation, and any other things that are impacting that facility.
Chairman?
Sure.
Thank you, Joe. If I could just make a brief comment regarding it, because this seems to be certainly a topic of interest and ought to be. But to be clear, from what was just presented by Enterprise, when we talk about the green initiatives that are incorporated into this project, that was bid, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a premium of about $44,000. $44,000 is included in this overall price, which would be considered a premium above the standard bill. There was about an 8% premium for the heat pumps, and a premium of the 20% of $16,000 for the spray foam installation. in the project is hot water heaters, solar hot water heaters, which were received through a donation through Connecticut Green Bank, which the town had applied for a donation and received that. That will be installed with the project. However, the material was donated. The solar that is said to be feeding this building, that'll be a decision that will come at a later date. The town of Branford has, on a number of occasions, evaluated the use of solar on our buildings. You may be aware that the school is actually doing 2 elementary schools this summer. And they're doing that through a power purchase agreement. If the town in the future elects after this project, it's not incorporated in this project, it's not part of the 1.7 million or the $3+ million. We will then evaluate it as we have at other times, and we looked at this, and if it's feasible, if it meets the demand, and it benefits is financially feasible as a benefit to the project, then we'll entertain that at that time. But to be clear, solar, other than the hot water heaters, is not in this project. And to be clear, the green measures that are being incorporated in this project amount to about a premium of about $44,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Can I make a comment to that, just 1 minute?
No, Dwayne, you cannot. Thank you. It's not the way I'm running the meeting.
He says one thing, I know.
We have questions from the board. I know Victor has one.
Could you estimate the payback period of that $44,000 investment?
I would expect it to be pretty rapid. I don't know that I could put a time frame on it, but just with the nature of the high efficiency heat pumps that you have and the thermal insulation levels that are in the roof, I think it would be pretty rapid. Pretty rapid. The nature of the price of electrical in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you.
Just to add on a little bit from from what I understand, there's heavy incentives to installing through Eversource, through installing some of these systems. The difference between a standard building code required system versus these energy efficient systems is somewhere in the range to like 80 to 95% of the difference comes back as an incentive through Eversource. That's still yet to be determined. And we're still looking at what systems are actually designed to be in the building. And from what I understand, they're still figuring out what those incentives will be coming back. So.
Okay, and Charlie had a question.
Brian, how efficient are the heat pumps?
I don't know that I could recite to you a percent, but it's high. It's probably over 90%. I would want to confirm that. Yeah, they're incredibly efficient.
How long have they been around?
How long?
Yeah.
They've been around for a while, but they've gotten very good in the last 10 years or so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and could you explain the difference on page 5? Sure. The 15 mechanical, 1500.
So again, the mechanical is a combination of the HVAC and plumbing line items, which were publicly bid. So the apparent low plumbing contractor and the apparent low HVAC bidder, the combined price is the $582. So again, I'm comparing to the allocation that was provided to us.
So what's the difference between the 214 that was originally estimated and the 582,000 that was bid? Is it labor? Is it material? Is it scope?
I suspect it's probably a combination of everything, just based on material escalation now, but also the conceptual budgeting process seemed to be historically based on kind of historical rough per square foot numbers, but we've gone out with 100% documents to get competitive bids. So I don't know that I could speak exactly to what the difference is, having not prepared the original 214 number, but that's what I would suspect.
And the electrical, we had 262,000 it comes in at, we had estimated 147,000.
I think it's the same. So I think holistically across the board, it's some combination of material escalation and possibly some under budgeting.
But finishes, they did well.
And even on general conditions. It came down, so.
It's not funny, but it's woods and plastics, 371,000. The estimate was 179,000. Again, these are, what we're seeing here is that really the numbers were incorrect that were presented originally, is what it appears to be, because the scope isn't, unless you're telling me it's all price escalation.
I think it's probably a lot of it, but I don't think it would be fair to say it's all of it.
Whereas the scope on the site work was increased. That's somewhat, was there any scope creep on anything else? Any of the other divisions? John? That you're aware of?
Nothing that I'm aware of. Again, I also wasn't part of the conceptual budget, but just looking at the conceptual plans, I think the scope itself did not substantially change. It's really, again, within that site work number is where you're going to see the biggest scope change. Everything else, I think, was, again, I can't speak for Joe Seapot, the architect, but what was in his conceptual mind, but they're much more creative than engineers, so.
So I'll turn it over to Charlie in a second. So that, go ahead, Charlie, I want you to ask the question.
I was looking at page 5, Brian.
Sure.
And for the building I'm currently doing, wood is going up about the lumber's going up about 33%. If I look at this wood and plastics, from 371 it went down.
Actually, it went up. It was 179, Charlie, and it's now 371. So it went up the 191,574. So yeah,
371 is the current.
Is the current price, correct? And that's woods and plastic. So that's a combination of not just the lumber, but it's also the custom casework, finished carpentry, and lumber.
So, Charlie, are you all set?
Yeah.
So, on page 8, when we look at masonry, there was no masonry originally estimated.
Correct.
Where's the masonry now?
Now the masonry is at 81,000.
No, I know that dollar.
Oh, we're in terms of in the scope. It's so there's the back of the kennel area has insulated CMU. There's a mechanical space at the back of the kennel, which is an addition. There's also a small amount of stone veneer that's on the addition component of the building. It's about 4 foot plus or minus water table.
And that's not that it's a big number. The steel is, what's that?
Steel is, for the most part, there's some mesh panels that's around the cat run area, and there's a small amount of lintels and some miscellaneous structural
steel.
Yep. It's mostly the mesh.
And not to harp on it, but the thermal protection, there was nothing estimated. How does that, but you said that you thought it was in special construction?
I could be, I'm speculating, Joe, but I can't speak to why the Division 7 wouldn't be accounted for unless it was a misallocation to special construction. But again, from our first budget, which is the second column on that page 8, we anticipated 296,000, which actually, you see the bids came back higher from our initial budget as well in the Division 7. So we actually under budgeted. So in our estimating process, we have typically have an estimating contingency for those things, because if we have an error in emission from a 70% budget to a hard bid, our accountability is that an estimating contingency would be eroded to, not expose the owner to additional costs, which is the draft GMP, includes a GMP contingency for those types of things. If there is additional escalation from the time of bid, or if there are issues within the documents, we're presenting you with a guaranteed maximum price. The estimate, the 3A construction cost includes a GMP contingency. The owner's construction contingency was also eroded. You can see that on the trail. So again, that would be included within the 3A. Those contingencies are included. So it is a true guaranteed maximum price.
And so your firm was selected as the CM.
Correct.
And how many other companies bid on that?
I don't know that I have a number. I think we were one of 4 finalists. I'm aware of that.
4 finalists.
Yeah, Chairman, I believe there were, I think it was 11 responses.
For CM?
For CM, and 11 or 12, and then we had shortlisted it down to 3 or 4, did interviews, and selected Enterprise through that process.
And in your contract, what is the rates that your company is charging?
So our general conditions was locked at a lump sum of the $272,039, which you see on the top line on the report, Joe. And then our fee is 3.5% of the subtotal of the construction cost.
On construction, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Robert?
Brian, really would be helpful if we had a line item breakdown detail.
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, these are just general numbers too.
Sure. So
I'd like to really see the detail.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we have, all these are estimates which are collapsed down for the sake of brevity for conversation tonight, but these are all supported by an immense amount of detail which can be provided to you with no issue.
Mr. Chairman, question?
Harry, yes.
Brian, in terms of the bidders, the mechanicals and the other building supplies, you're satisfied that if we ever get to the form of going to some form of contract, that they are satisfactory to doing the job? And,
yes, we are. I mean, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah. Have you had access to the bids that lost in terms of, say the mechanicals? How many bid, and how close or how far off were they?
Sure. So I'll speak to that question first, Harry, and then I'll let Wayne speak to the access question. Sure. So the bid results, which I have copies of these, which I can provide to you as well, but on the mechanical specifically, Harry. So the apparent low bidder was Advanced Sheet Metal Associates, and their bid price was $343,312. So there were 5 bidders above Advanced, starting with Alliance All Trades at $385, then Crest at $457, Main Enterprises at $492, Eastern Energy Services $538, and then I'm rounding down rough numbers, and then DeRienzo at $595. So Wayne, why don't you speak to your process?
So part of the vetting process, I brought in the low, and then I brought in the middle and the high to just talk and make sure they had scope and compare, find out from the high if there was something that the low could have missed. So I'm confident in that process that I've performed, that they have the scope.
Yeah, we've essentially substantially completed the major trades with that process with no major issues. The only issue we've seen thus far is actually the low final cleaning bid, withdrew their bid. So, but that's why we established a contingency if there's any kinds of issues like that. There's a nominal increase to go to the second bidder. But that again, it's not additional cost to the town. It's incorporated because of the way that we designed the guaranteed maximum price. So beyond that, the major trades, the framing, the site work, the concrete, down the line have all been vetted, and we're very confident.
Charlie?
Is it your experience that the contingency is used up by the change orders?
The contingency is typically, it's a guaranteed maximum price, right? So if we, we're representing a guaranteed maximum price based on a set scope of work that are defined by a set of construction documents. So if the owner opts to make an added scope, we want it to be extreme, add a second story to the building. That obviously would not be accounted for under a GMP. But if there's, there's an inferable or a gray area scope that, the GMP is intended to cover that eventuality, to deliver to you a building based on a set of instructions, plans, specifications, addenda, et cetera. So change order, if there are change orders, in terms of unforeseen conditions, yes, that's what it's for. There's a construction contingency, there's a GMP contingency, but it's not for added scope per se. So if we wanted to upgrade something from the set of documents we have, no. But if there is something that's gray or inferable, yes. That's why the contingency is there. We're guaranteeing the price.
Mr. Chairman?
Bob?
So as we have seen today, some movement in the lumber pricing downward, which is a good sign.
Yes.
So we get locked into this contract with you, and then we find some savings. Are you bringing those savings to the table, and how do we know that?
Absolutely. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah, we would come up and offer those as credits, for various items. As we move forward with the submittal process, if there's an opportunity to look at a different project to save costs, we'll present that along with the cost value savings that would be for them.
We have a formal change order process that would say, here's the proposed savings, here's the schedule difference, or what have you, if there is one, and then here's the potential savings. So our work doesn't end when we establish a GMP. We're continually trying to find savings throughout the process to make sure that we're getting you the best value for your dollar.
Thank you.
So maybe the follow-up question on that, Bob, is when you talked about the submittals from the subcontractors, you go through the vetting process as well for the submittals, and that's when you would know exactly what the price is and what they're paying for particular items?
If they were trying to offer a product that wasn't specified, that's when they'd have to disclose the cost of that. You know, say, hey, well, take for instance the light fixture package is always one electricians like to submit an alternate package. So we would have to, before we would submit that for approval, we need to understand what the savings would be to go to that package.
But before that process, they're locked in. So they've produced a bid on a bid form with,
not to exceed
to us. No, it's to not to exceed, exactly.
So that's where I think Bob's question is if in fact the actual commodities or the material prices reduce over a period of months. How do we inure any of those savings?
We ask them, all subcontractors are required to produce a schedule of values as part of their subcontract. So we won't stop challenging them, even if they have a lump sum contract, to say, we've seen a reduction in lumber costs. The owner should realize that. So it's part of the due diligence process. We still have to lock them into a lump sum price to get them a subcontract.
Not to exceed, right?
But we don't stop when that's done. It's we'll continue that process if need be. And lumber is dropping, but plywood is still on the increase. So it is, and that's the third part of our presentation. We are seeing substantial material cost increase across the board right now. I have a number, some literature that I could share with you if you like, just what we're seeing. And even today, while lumber seems to be on the downward trend, I heard from an electrician this morning that switchgear, within 2 weeks, all of the four major switchgear manufacturers are looking at a 20% increase. So there's also a pressure back the other way to say it's a leading indicator, right? The COVID, everything else, the prices kind of they flow through the kind of the supply chain. Our effort with this project and with other projects would be to get everyone locked as soon as possible, so we're not exposed to additional. But again, that's the nature of the GMP. So we're saying we've got it. The subs have a 90-day. They were directed to hold their numbers, so that's included within their bids. And then we continue to work it to get it out as part of our DNA, really, our process.
Okay. Do you have other things you wanted to go over with us?
No, again, I have a number of examples and literature that I could share with you if you like, in terms of suppliers producing from September to today, the various things that we've seen increases. Lumber specifically, Charlie, to your question, is where we just priced a project. It was priced in October, and today for the lumber, I think is up 135%. 135%. Yeah. So from October till today. So again, it is dropping. The future market had its most substantial drop in history last week because of it's starting to retreat. But that takes time to flow through the markets, and literally where they go to buy the material is still seeing the increase. So it'll come. But when is the question?
One question, Mr. Chairman.
Harry, sure.
What is the expiration date on the bids? Is it
90 days from the bid due date?
August 10th. So we have time.
Yep. But we haven't. There's been no issues thus far with anyone holding their price in terms of through our vetting process. Everyone is still honoring what they bid.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Jamie, any questions or?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Mooney. If I could hearing from some of the questions, I think it's important to, from some of the members asking about the comparison and getting into more detail, I think, and then also going through the variances and showing that maybe some things were not included or not seen. And I think it's important to recognize the process that the architect and when presenting for the initial appropriation went through. Basically, I think it was just a general per square foot price, working with another firm to develop those numbers. I think certainly the building itself has not changed much, if any, really, in, as I said, scope or scale. We mentioned some changes within the driveway configuration, the paving, site work, but the building itself, it largely remained as I said a couple weeks ago to this board, I think there was a number of factors that were attributable to the increase. Certainly, escalation in construction cost is certainly one. Going back to last August when we came before this body and the design team presented an estimate based off of the level of design they were at, that number, I think it's safe to say, could have been a little bit low to begin with. We've seen that in other projects. You go through a project, whether it's this building we're in now, the community center, pretty much any project you go through, and there's you're basing the number on the information that you have at that time, and we're basing our decision whether to proceed with a project on the information. However, I just want to point out that this body, as well as the RTM, approved the project unanimously. The community at large has responded in support of this project, I think greater than we've seen in any town project, certainly in that I can recall, in terms of the amount of donations and direct donors, individual, unique donors within the town of Branford and North Branford that contributed to this project. So just want to point out that the project hasn't changed. Now where we are, discussion came on about when Enterprise came on board and they started to go through their look at the project and create a budget. And at that time, there was, from them going through their analysis, that it was shown that the initial appropriation was not going to hold. They went back and they VE'd some items at that point. And you may say, well, why didn't they stop and come to us at that point in time for increase the appropriation? Well, keep in mind, that was still at 70% design. That process in itself, still, looking at the numbers, still would have been $500,000 short of where we ultimately landed when we went to the street. So a decision was made to proceed with the bidding process, so then we can make a decision based on real numbers whether to proceed with this project. I think the need is there. I think we spoke to the project, and I think it's been stated and confirmed that the project hasn't changed significantly of what was approved previously. It's looking at those numbers. But I just want to understand, the board and the public and the RTM members to realize that decision was made to proceed. So you had all the information to make a decision. As stated, those contractors now have to hold that price for 90 days. This is protecting us from any further volatility that may have occurred and in the market. And there's no obligation at this time but to consider, and as you said, Chairman Mooney, do your due diligence and homework as the board always does in evaluating these projects.
Thanks, Jamie. It does show that the public bid process is, in my mind, a bit flawed to the extent that you have to appropriate a lump sum of money and have authorization before you go out to bid. And so to some extent, you're either going on incomplete information or you're tipping your hand as to how much money you're going to spend, versus if you're in the private sector, then it's done a little differently. So, but it does seem that in this case, there were scopes and part of the construction requirements that were not included in the original estimate. If not, we probably wouldn't be off by so much. So I would ask Brian, for us going forward, how do towns or municipalities deal with the uncertainty of going in, estimating a project based on schematics or less than, close to bid construction documents? It's almost like you should have a design build, some type of design build process.
That's one approach. The other, I mean, really the construction management process as it's designed, where the construction manager is brought on board from concept. That's the best way to solve it, because the process that we use from not even schematic design, but conceptual design is to look at, again, a combination of historical data and engagement with vendors to get real costs on a napkin. You know, literally sometimes where it's, okay, here's a schematic or conceptual floor plan, and we're able to say, okay, you know, we can advise to that level of contingency, you know, at that time, so that the appropriation can be maybe not accurate, but at least, you know, closer to the mark, not on the green, but on the fairway. Said a different way, but that's the best way we've seen it, because about 50% of our work is performed construction management, and that's always our approach. You know, we're asked to budget projects sometimes, you know, that are 5 years out, and you know, still have a level of confidence in the numbers, and that's the nature of the construction management process. So those are the ways that we can at least help project.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Charlie? Yeah.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
It's not in your presentation that you gave us is how to fund this increase if we do it. It shows we take an additional debt at like a 2.3.
Hang on, Charlie. We're going to.
How are we going to do this?
We're going to talk right now. We're going to work on the expense side, and then we'll go over to the presentation and move on that. So, any other questions from these gentlemen with regards to the cost side, scope size, construction, etc.?
Well, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, you're going to get back to us on the breakdown?
Yeah, we'll provide that to you tomorrow morning.
Okay, I think if you guys, for now, I think you can sit there. You're free to sit there. We're going to deal with the second part of agenda item number 1. Why don't we do that? And actually then, as Charlie alluded to, we have Jim was kind enough to put together as I say, a pathway for funding if in fact the board is positive in considering that. So Jim, would you like to go over the highlights of that letter?
Thank you. I just want to point out a couple of things. I'm not going to address all the comments that were made tonight. We can do that privately sometime. I do think there were some fair questions that were asked. The first is the timing. My letter was written on June 11. The details were received today on June 15th. And I did have some comments on the presentation, suggestions to the folks today. That's why one of my observations was when I said that I trust the construction manager can provide more detail as to where the prices are. They've given you some examples today. They've talked about the numerous projects where they've seen price increases. I'm still trying to get my head around the 135% increase in lumber prices. And they've agreed to give you more detail. So that's kind of consistent with my understanding. The other thing I want to clear up is that I did not say that inflation was 15%. I said that the casual observation is, and I think if I did a show of hands in the room, I says, how many people think the prices for the things they buy are higher today than they were when this project was approved? And I think it's fair to say most people would raise their hands that prices are higher. What I was trying to do, and the approach I took, which is a approach, doesn't have to be the approach, is to do a shared framework of the various stakeholders. In a simple world, the town could simply say, we're going to authorize another $1.7 million in debt. The shelter doesn't have to raise a dime. North Branford will fund 33% of that. And the $1.7 million isn't going to hurt our bond rating. The town will make the debt payments. will still be AAA. Our fund balance will still be in the high 28s. I brought those numbers tonight. And I would be hearing every budget year that we should be using more of fund balance. We have too much in fund balance. That's a point Mr. Cook has made. Too much in the general fund, too much in the self-insurance, too much in the OPEB trust. So that's what a community is, right? There's diverse opinions, put in context the numbers. Happens all the time. So the approach I was looking at is the numbers that the taxpayer would be expected to pay is not going to be zero. It's going to be something higher than what it was in September. And so you try to frame this. You know, it's like you might do in a private sector gap analysis. What's the gap and how do we fill this? So it's okay. We looked at 15% on the net. You know, it would be a higher number if it was on the total. That would be roughly $306,000. It would have to be additional borrowing. And if you do that approach, you know, the cost is relatively small over time. And remember, North Branford is paying for some of this too, which I didn't get into a lot of details in the memo. I'm happy to get into that later in the presentation. The other overriding assumption in all of this, and if this assumption is not true, then we could probably end the meeting after Lisa's item. And that is that the community wants this project. So if the community wants this project, then to my fault and other issues, I step out of my lane a little bit and try to go and find a way to make something happen.
Say, Jim, I'd rarely interrupt you, but you don't need to justify what you did, okay? You did a wonderful job on this pathway, okay? So that's your nature and that's your skill, okay? So why don't we walk through what your thoughts are?
Sure.
And that way, as I say, we have absolute confidence, I speak for the board, as to how you put things together and your reasoning. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, you led me to the correct path, so appreciate it. I think then the Reader's Digest condensed version is, if you look at your handout, is more of a table format. And the premise is really based on a shared framework. So you can see that we start, step one is, what does this new request do to the town's debt requirements? And you're going back to the original estimates because that's the basis for comparison on everything we're discussing tonight. And at that point, the net cost to the town of Branford, excluding any North Branford share of the debt service, would be $2,040,000. Based on the revised request, we would add $1,700,000 to that. It would be $3,740,000. So basically, as I said earlier, it's not going to be zero, it's going to be something. So we're looking at another $306,000. So then the total amount that the town would then need to borrow is $2,346,000. But if we wanted to basically get that number from $3,740,000 back to the $2,346,000, we have to come up with $1,394,000. That's the gap that we need to close. In recognizing that you have various stakeholders in the project, and that would be the town of North Branford and the donor community. We've already talked about the taxpayers. One way to close it is to take $650,000 from fund balance, which would be consistent with some of the ways we use fund balance in the past. We've used it when there's been events kind of beyond our control. Certainly the economy we're in is beyond our control. Branford participates in the economy. Branford doesn't control the economy. So So 650,000 on the fund balance seemed reasonable. It's not going to deteriorate the fund balance. Our fund balance will still be higher than it was 3 years ago. And that has an impact on North Branford. And so I've been in touch with the North Branford Finance Director. He had a committee meeting last week with his finance committee to discuss it. And, they're supposed to match, their percent of what we spend. But that'll be $214,500, which they haven't appropriated because they've already set their budget in mill rate. Now, what folks may not realize is that this situation has happened in Branford before as it relates to the sewer agreements. So what I've done is I've offered North Branford terms of paying this back over 5 years. Another thing to remember about North Branford, which is not on this sheet, his biggest concern was not the $214,000 payable over 5 years. It wasn't paying 33% on the town's debt or on the difference. It was the fact that North Branford's going out to bid within the month on a high school renovation, I think this month on the police station. They are concerned with a 135% increase in lumber and some of the things that our estimating friends from Enterprise have talked about. Then the third set of stakeholders are the donors, who I think it's fair to say are concerned right now. They're concerned that a project that they feel is viable, a project that has a lot of public support, is in jeopardy. And, one of the things that, Harry, I think you pointed out on Friday when we spoke, is that when you have lots of stakeholders, you got to keep the stakeholders engaged. Your work with philanthropy, for example, you cited examples of when, a donor base is disoriented or basically becomes emotionally disconnected from your project's in trouble. The other thing I think I would, and again, I don't have specific examples, but I would love to find a community that raised this kind of funds in a pandemic. I mean, I think that's nothing short of remarkable on the part of these folks. And it seems like my conversations with Laura is that they're willing to step up to the plate. So what does this all mean? What does this all mean to future taxpayers? If I'm watching this in my living room, I say, well, how does this affect my taxes? And quite honestly, in this scenario, you would basically pay another, you would pay the debt service on $306,000 over 15 years, of which North Branford would pay about a third. So your net cost over 15 years would be about $245,000, or about $16,000 a year. Is that a lot of money? I counted it out in $50 bills on my kitchen table, I'd say it's a lot of money. If I looked at it in the context of a $121 million plus budget, that would seem to be tolerable, manageable, doable. So this is a plan which captures the elements of a shared framework. It's not the only plan. You could look at these variables, come up with your own iterations. You can decide other variations. You could do a 2-variable solution, a 1-variable solution. Ultimately, gentlemen, that decision is yours. But I know that the appropriating bodies are in a difficult spot because of the optics of a 60% increase. Now, we've already generally established that there's a couple reasons why that increase is high. Probably didn't start out with a good value. We've seen this in revaluations, right? If the old reval is bad, the new reval looks worse because there's a difference between A and B. But we also know that there's price escalation. The question this community has to ask is, in spite of all this, is this a project worth pursuing in Branford? And if it is, what pathway has the least impact on the taxpayers going forward? And those were the things that I tried to take into consideration in this model.
Thanks, Jim. Questions from Jim on his memo?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Harry?
If Jim can get back to us at hopefully our next meeting on a couple of things. Would you have discussions with North Branford on upping their contribution if we're dealing with this unknown number of an increase right now?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Harry, I missed the first part of the question.
The North Branford contribution
Yes.
in terms of them upping their ante a bit.
So you want North Branford to
pay more?
Pay more?
Yeah.
What's your justification
The
of that?
answer is, I see this as three ways of participating the problem. Board of Finance is going to make it with town funds. The second part of my question is the animal shelter in terms of what they've received in contributions to date, meaning the hard cash, how much is in pledges, and also from foundations, because foundations usually give grants on their calendar. So we don't want to lose anything because they could be on a fiscal year, and I think that's something we need to have as we work on the income side. I agree with the chairman. You put together a good set of conceptual proposals of how we can get there. And I'm saying I need some clarification on some of the other issues.
So Harry, specifically, you're asking for North Branford to contribute more.
More.
And what else?
And to get an answer on our donations to date.
Donations to date.
In terms of cash received.
Yep. And pledges.
Balance in the pledges.
Yep.
And if there are any issues with foundations that are pledged or said they're going to contribute or approved that will interfere with their fiscal year, which means you may have to reapply for the money.
Got it. Okay, what's the foundation?
Be caught short. And the last is that to see what additional contributions and fundraising they could do.
Well, let me.
Okay, so hang on, Jim. So those are the questions for that. And Jim, do we have information about what they've received in cash?
Yeah, they received towards the project expenses before you tonight just under $700,000
in cash.
Yeah, deposits. Now the pledges, I don't track the pledges. The pledges are tracked by the campaign folks. Your suggestion on North Branford, while I appreciate every dollar from North Branford, it's one less dollar from Branford, is problematic because you have to have a basis for the increase. If you saw my number, 214.5, there's a basis for that. And the basis is roughly 33%. And that's, based on population. So you have to kind of have some measurable thing to do that. North Branford does understand that aspect of it. The agreements or the amendments to the agreement through their finance director was met with committee members, and I assume the town manager. I was not in those meetings, nor did I attend the meetings in North Branford. They did have some questions afterwards, which I addressed, highlighting that this is favorable to them. So, that's based on a percentage. So if they were to pay more, then the town would have to use more of its fund balance.
So that's because your 33% is
it's of the 650.
All right, so let's leave it that there. We can address that, but And Bob, do you have any other questions?
No, not at this time.
Charlie?
I just want to clarify again, because I looked at our increase in debt stroke, or the total debt. So down the bottom, you said North Branford is paying 33.33%. So if they're paying a third of the total debt, plus their
Third of the fund balance contribution.
yeah, but plus they're contributing of 214, that's about 33%.
Yeah, and they're really apples and bowling balls. Basically, so if we contribute from fund balance, okay, then North Branford should contribute from their fund balance, right? And they should contribute a proportionate amount based on an agreement. Now, so you got two communities that have a variety of interlocal agreements on other issues. What if we took the whole thing out of fund balance? For argument's sake, right? $1.7 million out of fund balance. Well, now we just put North Branford in a headlock, right? So that's where you have to kind of respect your counterparties, respect your northern neighbors, and respect the counterparties which you have multiple agreements with, because we'll probably have other agreements with them in the future. And that's why we offered them terms. It might actually be easier if we just bonded the whole thing, because then they would pay it off over 15 years, right? It'd be a higher number. So instead of $2,346,000, it'd be $3,740,000, and then they would pay it off over 15 years. Okay, so that might work for North Branford, but then how does that work for the stakeholder of the Branford taxpayer who we're trying to protect? So, you're trying to manage the various stakeholders and come up with something that's fair. Now, could this be tweaked, and can we argue that it's fair? But the numbers that are the hardest to adjust is the fund balance piece from the town and North Branford's corresponding piece. The numbers that are the easiest, to play with are really the amount of debt we issue and the amount of donations that they make.
All right, thanks, Jim. Charlie, any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Victor?
Good.
Jeff?
Good, thank you.
Item number 2 has got a resolution in there to increase the appropriation from $2,895,000 to $4,595,000. And Harry, you made 2 comments tonight about looking for additional information.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that you would rather not vote tonight?
I would not be voting for it tonight. I would suggest we table it until we get the information from the construction management and a refined income version from Mr. Finch.
Okay.
I'll second.
So we're not voting that, but you're saying that's your, so
it would be
that's your indication,
My
Mr.
indication.
Harry and Robert, that's your indication?
Well, yes, I would like to move to take no action on this item this evening. Again, looking for the detail and looking at the pathway for a little bit longer before we make a decision as a board.
And Charlie, your sentiment?
I support with Harry and Bob. I would like some more time.
For what types of questions?
I'd like to see the information from Brian, and I'd like to study the handout a little more.
Okay. Jeff, you indicate your consideration?
Well, I'd like to see the additional information come in also, Joe, but I'd like to see this thing fast-tracked so that we're handling it on June 28th at our meeting to make the final decision.
Victor?
I feel the same way.
Okay.
Not beyond the next meeting.
Jim, you have a comment?
Yeah, the one aspect that I'm a little uncomfortable with is you want to see a refined income projection. I think you guys have to come up with an income projection and ask me how we implement it.
I get it. I think that to some extent there's not a comfort level in voting for tonight, even though I think I'm not going to force a vote tonight, so that I respect everybody's support of the project. I think there's a general support of the project, speaking to the folks. I think there's still questions that board members would like to see answered, if possible. If not, there is, to some extent, there is unknowns. I think Jim has created a pathway, in my mind, is acceptable. I think that we still we have other questions that need to be addressed, and I'd like to respect that. So with that, I will entertain a motion to defer or table item number 2.
I'll make that, move that, Joe.
May I ask one question?
No, you can't.
Question, not a comment.
I don't need anything from you, Mr. Cook. Thank you. Right? Not at this
Very
point.
good question.
So
Second.
there was a motion was made. Victor seconded. Is there comments or discussion by the board? All in favor?
Can I ask a question now?
Item number 3. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
How do you feel, Brian?
Item number 3. Item number 3 is to hear a request from the town clerk pursuant to 42-1 of the code for positive recommendation to the Board of Selectmen regarding approval of a 5-year contract renewal with COT system for the Resolution 3 Land Records Management System software. Lisa?
Thank you, Chairman. As you may recall, COT Systems has been our land record. It's on. COT Systems has been our land record software provider for the last 16 years.
That whole building is sold.
Wayne?
The whole building is sold.
Knock it off.
How have you
Lisa, go ahead, proceed.
So COT Systems has held their price for the last 8 years on the software support contract that we have with them. The 2 material differences with this renewal is that we've previously been on a 3-year term, and COT is proposing to extend that to a 5-year term in order to maintain the price that we've enjoyed over the last 8 years. The second material difference is that there's a one-time interface fee to begin to accept receiving documents for recording via electronic means. So what that means is instead of receiving a document in the mail or via Federal Express or UPS or an attorney coming in person to record a document, the electronic means would be just that. We would receive a scan of the documents and either accept it or disapprove of receiving it due to maybe the fees being wrong or a document being missing. So I did put the cart before the horse. I apologize. I went before the Board of Selectmen on June 2nd to seek their approval, not realizing that I should have come before this board first, but they unanimously approved the 5-year renewal contingent upon this board's favorable review.
So we have the details here, and there's a revenue sharing aspect. So we have about $28,000 so far this fiscal year that's come to the town as a result of the fees, the revenue sharing on the fees.
Correct. So that's the 11-month year-to-date figure. We did budget a $14,000 revenue number, so we've certainly exceeded that by at least double. So the contract renewal is for $12,240 per year. There is that one-time fee of $1,280 to begin to e-record. And then also in the contract, there's additional fees that are already encompassed in my regular budget, and that's about $5,500 in microfilm costs, as well as required auditing of our indexing.
Okay. So there's no, so this is all included in, you estimated this in your budget, which we approved?
Yes, the monthly fee of $1,020 comes out of Debbie's budget for IT. The $1,280 one-time fee would come out of my budget, which is a $15,000 line item for computer indexing system and expenses. And then the microfilm is billed on a monthly basis based on the number of instruments that we record, as well as the auditing fee, which is based on the number of documents we record. But I estimate that those are combined $5,500 a year, again, out of my budget.
Okay.
It's already budgeted.
So questions from Lisa's presentation? She provided us with the detail on the contract and other information. Bob?
Yeah. So Lisa, during the pandemic, I would assume that this was very, very helpful with folks being able to get in and get documents, not coming into the town hall, so, for a physical search. So, and I think the next natural step to this is, you're right on, is the recording end of the document. So I would move this for approval.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Other questions on this?
I think it's straightforward.
Okay, so I'll read a resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the Board of Selectmen approve a 5-year contract renewal with the COTS system for the town clerk.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with no other business to come before the board, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.